Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this very special occasion, because today we're delighted that Derek is going to talk to us, ably assisted by Dave, and we're going to have a talk about the early history of St. Francis Church, and we're going to record it so that other people who are not able to join us right now will be able to watch us. So without any more ado, here is Derek. Welcome, and the floor is yours. Oh, before we start, could I invite everyone, if they can, to mute themselves, because that will just help the signal and we'll have less interference. So if you would mute yourself, that would be great. Thank you.
We'll not mute, Joe. We'll keep it. We'll keep ours open. Right.
Okay.
Could be a short talk if we mute us. Okay, so let me just. Okay. All right. Over here.
Well, hello, everybody. Lovely for you to call. I'm introducing this and wanting you to be able to stop me if there's anything that crops up, either in what I say or the pictures. Don't forget, it's your development, your learning about the early things. So the only way to do it is to interrupt me. I'll try and answer your questions. The first question that I gave myself was, why or how did St. Gabriel's come to want to start a church other than the one that they had? Because High Heaton at the time finished at Cragside. Beyond Cragside, there was very, very little in the way of housing. They were beginning to do one or two housing estates, but very, very little. And I don't know whether it was the vicar, whether it was the bishop, whether it was a local authority who advised them to try and get a new church. I'm not quite sure. But a decision was made that St. Gabriel's obviously could not cope with the development which was going to be taken in the next few years. And so a suitable site had to be found. And seeing that Cragside was sort of the limit, they looked just beyond there to see a suitable site. And eventually, as you know, it was just on the north side of Cragside. That is roughly where we're talking. If you don't know where it is, some people don't realize that the Scout Hut, as it is now, was our church in 1935.
Explain why you turned that upside down as well. It's Teesdale.
All right.
Church.
Yes.
The writing's upside down.
The writing's upside down. That's right. That's just so that we can identify where we are. Teesdale Gardens. This is at the top end, you see. And what we used to do was used to come in on season. However, I'm jumping the gun. Before we get to that stage, we've got to find out, as we got the site, we then had to find suitable builders who could build something at the cost that we could afford. And so at the time, Canon Trotter, who was in charge of St. Gabriel's at the time, gave the priest in charge, a priest who was a curate at St. Gabriel's, the job of finding A, the site, and B, the builders who could build something which we could afford. And eventually that was
Gingerly.
no, Guy Goodrick was the priest. Guy Goodrick was the priest, and he was a curate at St. Gabriel's along with 2 or 3 others. And what happened after that was, although they had the site, they then needed a builder, and they went all over the place to try and find a suitable builder who could build it at the right time, the right cost, etc. And eventually, Ginger Lee, a Manchester firm, got the job. And that was wonderful, except that we had no foundations, we had no electricity, no gas, no water, anything. So we had to start from scratch again to find out local contractors who would do that job for us. In actual fact, what did happen was, right at the beginning,
what we found here, just to help out, I found this, which was from a Methodist magazine, Methodist newspaper, and you can see right up at the top, it was July 1911, and Ginger Lee are actually advertising in the Methodist newspaper to build churches. And so that this is their advert up here on the right hand side, and on the left hand side you can see where it was on the paper, and you can see their actual address. I've actually looked it up on Google Maps, as you do, and it's now I think there's a convent there, and certainly on that street. I don't quite know where the building was, but there's this sort of quite modern sort of building. But that's the sort of advert that perhaps Guy Goodrick or whoever actually would have picked up and inquired about. Okay. So
Ginger Lee, as a firm, it wasn't their speciality churches. Their speciality was farm buildings, and they built great big barns, and that was why probably it was all wooden. From beginning to end, the whole project, that is building with the foundations and all the services, it took less than a year to build, just because it was a prefabricated building. But once we got the building, we had nothing to put into it. So Guy Goodrick, that's Guy Goodrick right in the middle there with his dog collar on, was given the job of trying to find suitable furniture to put in. We had no altar, no nothing. And what happened was, at the time, there was St. Peter's in the town, Oxford Street, I think it was, which went on to, it was pulled down, and the Church of the Divine Unity was built in its place. And when they pulled their church down, we managed to get some of their throwouts. People, things like the altar, the angel, some hymn books, psalters, and things like that. And occasionally we got the odd chairs, etc. That's the eagle that we got. And everything was very, 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 very black. The altar, which you can't see very well, but the altar is very black. The reredos was very black, and the canopy above it was very black. The whole thing was black, but that was the fashion, apparently, in those days. However, what we tried to do was go around different churches to gather their leftovers, what they had spare. And St. Gabriel's were very kind, and they gave us quite a few things, including their organ. Now the organ was a hand-blown organ when it was first got, and it was in their church hall on Chillingham Road. And just before we got it, they had altered it from a hand blow to electric. So that made it a lot easier for the organist to play. So you didn't have to have a little choir boy stood at the side, pumping away and getting the air into the organ. Unfortunately, our church and hall were heated by gas. And gas heaters, they're a form of damp heating. And what used to happen was, and I'm talking about 6 or 8 times every service, or every time the organ was played, the notes used to stick, because the notes, especially the foot pedals, were rods what went up and down, wooden rods, and they used to stick. And so the choir boy, their little job was to go run around the organ and press these things to keep the organ going properly.
Just stop there and go back. Just going to drop back a little bit because we've skipped out of sync a bit. Hang on.
Before that.
Yeah. Hang on, I'm well lost. Hang on, I'm just gonna stop sharing for a minute. Just ask if anybody has any questions at this stage. Maybe.
Has anybody?
No question, but it's interesting. Well, a photograph you showed with Canon Trotter and the ladies, which was a little bit earlier. In actual fact, Sheila's mother was on that particular photograph.
Yes, that
so it was very interesting for us to see that.
Yeah.
Derek, can I ask, who chose the name St. Francis?
Is it what?
Who chose the name St. Francis?
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about it later on, but what happened was that we were allowed into the church before it was consecrated. It was about 3 or 4 months before, and it so happens that it was consecrated the day before St. Francis Day, which was the 4th of October. So I presume that was why it was named St. Francis.
If we just go back and share was that the photograph you were talking about, Alan?
Yes, the lady on the far left, as you look at it at the back.
This one?
In front of the window is Sheila's mother, and Sheila was sitting on somebody's lap. That's the Mothers' Union with Canon Trotter, and Sheila was sitting with one of the other ladies.
Yeah.
At that time.
Guy Goodrick.
That must have been about 1937, but 36, 35.
It was straight after it was consecrated.
Yeah.
That was the following year.
That's right.
And this is the guy that actually consecrated it. That was the bishop,
Yes.
Bilborough.
Yes.
And that might be answer St. Francis question, is it?
Yeah. Yes, he consecrated it. Now,
hang on, let's just scroll through. Missed out the. Right, you might
now
know about that.
that is the outside of the building, looking at it from Cragside. On the far right, you can just see a little door. Now that door went into the priest's vestry. I'll tell you about that later. Next to that, there's a double door with glass panels in it. That is now, or was then, a panic door, so that people could get out quickly because it was at a push bar on the inside. And at the bottom here on the left-hand side, there's a porch, and that was the main entrance into the church.
You want to talk about this bit or not?
Which bit's that?
Where you can see the altar.
Oh yeah. Have you got a picture of the altar?
We'll come on to it later.
Right.
That was the furniture, right.
That's the inside. Now on the extreme right, well, go from the altar, you can see how dark that canopy was and how the reredos was black. Now that's the eagle on the left. On the right is the stole, and just onto the right of the stole there is the door, and that door went down 3 or 4 steps into the vestry, which is on the extreme right behind what is the curtain, as you can see. The curtain, that was another entrance into the choir, into the priest's vestry. And you can see by these chairs what a variety we got. We were grateful to the people who gave us them. The trouble was that they could not accommodate the number of people that we got for evensong. And in those days, evensong was the main entrance, the main service, not the Eucharist as it is now. And what happened was that when the church was full, as it was full every Sunday, when the priests used to come out of the vestry, they used to have to come up the aisle in up the side aisle in single file, because there was a crucifer, 2 acolytes, and very often 2 members carrying a banner, then the priest after that. They used to come to the back of the church where the choir vestry was and pick up the choir, and the choir used to go down the centre aisle and up into the chancel.
Right, yeah, jumping well ahead now. So do you want to go back to talk about that arching thing, getting it like cleaning the thing?
You wonder what?
Yeah, talk about cleaning up the thing, the Masters.
Yeah. Well, so you can see that on the right is Father Archie. Now, the reason why Archie took over was that Guy Goodrick, before he came as a priest into St. Gabriel's, was a tea planter out in India. And I'm afraid he wasn't very well when he was with us. He did a phenomenal job setting the whole thing up and becoming our first priest in charge, but he was still a curate, in effect, of St. Gabriel's Church. So Father Archie took over after 9 months of the church being opened. And what he wanted, Archie was 6'4" in height, single man, full of energy, and a tremendous disciplinarian. A very, very high Anglo-Catholic, and that's where I was taught my Catholicism. We had great restrictions on what we could do and couldn't do, and it was all due to Archie. He taught us discipline, and don't forget, I was only 10, 11-year-old at the time. And what he wanted to do was lighten the place up, try and get a bit of light into the place. And he didn't like the eagle being so black. So he invited about 2 or 3 of us, I was one of them, I'm afraid, to lighten this eagle. And he gave us what I think was domestos or something very similar to clean this eagle. And it took us about 3 or 4 days. And we got the eagle white, and our hands were red with being burnt with whatever it was he gave us to eat. But we did the job. And very, very shortly after that, he decided, and I didn't know about this until probably the Easter, about 1940, and we went into church, and I was flabbergasted when I saw the altar. It was a new altar, and behind, as you can see, is a curtain, and that curtain went up about 10 feet and almost covered the window which was behind. A gold curtain, absolutely magnificent. On either side of the gold curtain, there were two curtains that went right away along, right out the sanctuary and up a little bit. And they were very, very, very dark green, velvet, absolutely magnificent. And you can see the carpet down below. That carpet was given. Archie again, as usual, went out and begged this from somebody, and it was a handmade carpet, and it fit the whole of the sanctuary. And Archie was also very, very well known for his love of flowers. And you can see the lilies on either side. He was very, very fond of lilies. He also, you will notice on the altar, the candlesticks and the cross. Now they were handmade by a member of the congregation, Mr. Berkeley. He made all those. He was a coppersmith, worked in a shipyard, and in his spare time, he made those candlesticks. And to my horror, I'm afraid they were cut down to what they are now. You can see what a wonderful sight it was. It was magnificent. Seeing those candles, the candles about 3 foot high on top of the candlesticks, they were absolutely wonderful. The cross we still got as its full height, and that's in the chapel at the moment. That's it there. Now then, whilst we're on this shot, this was another part of the change. There's all these new chairs, and you'll notice that the eagle is no longer in the chancel, because that's where the choir sat. So you went up the stairs, up the centre aisle, up the stairs, and on the left and right hand side, the choir sat. The other thing, I don't know whether you've noticed, but on the left hand side, you can see the font. Now the font, where do you think the normal place is for a font? Tell me. I'll tell you where the font normally is in the church. Is right at the entrance. When a baby is born and to be christened, it is the beginning of his or her formation to become a Christian. Why is the font in that place? It's because it's only that end of the church which was consecrated. This side where the congregation are sitting is the hall. At the moment you're seeing it as the church, with the priest's door on the right hand side, a new pulpit. I can't see the lectern there at all, but it was on the left hand side. So that's why that was there. Now above there, above the font, you can see a black thing. That black thing is the organ. So you can see where the choir sat, the organ was on top of us. It was great because the organist was with us all the time. Right. Question time. Ask me a question, and if I don't know the answer, I'll make an answer up. So unmute yourself.
Okay. Derek, please, just where's the eagle?
Sorry?
Where is the eagle?
Well,
See it.
I think he got rid of it eventually.
Oh.
But But initially, you see, that was a gift, and we couldn't refuse it.
Oh, right.
And that was up in the chancel, because there wasn't much room, but that's how they accommodated us.
This isn't a question, I'm afraid, but it's an observation. There's the church at Low Newton looks exactly like the old St. Francis Church. I don't know if you've ever seen it. If you go to Low Newton,
yeah,
at the top of the hill,
that's right.
Opposite the car park, well, no, before you get to the car park, there's a building that looks just like, it's green and it's prefabricated, and that's the church there. And they just look as if they could have been made by the same person, but it's still in use.
Yes.
I've never been inside.
We've been there once or twice. It's locked, but I have been there once or twice.
Yeah, I just wondered if it was made by the same company.
Was it?
I don't know.
Oh, could be. Yeah.
Anyway.
I think at one time there was lots of tin churches, weren't there, around, and people used to make sort of a church, and then it would sort of get passed around, wouldn't it? And yeah, sort of. So maybe that was part of it.
These prefabricated buildings actually have stood the test of time.
The building that you're talking about also, I think, is the only one in Northumberland like that has a stained glass window in it.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Right. Any more questions? You can catch me up later on.
That's a different view.
Now you see, you were asking about the eagle. The eagle is gone, and you see that on the left-hand side, just where the font was, you see the new lectern, along with the new pulpit on the right-hand side. Can you see the organ better than that one? Right on the left-hand side. Now, those right at the back in the sanctuary, you can see right in the back corner, the two standard things, and they're the organ speakers. We brought them, actually, I think we brought them to the present St. Francis at one time. Right. Now, let's move on from the church to the hall. The hall was very, very, very extensively used. Because we had such a big congregation, and very often they didn't know one another, because a lot of the houses were being built and people were moving in and obviously didn't know one another. And eventually, coming to church, they got to know one another. And so we had to have different organizations to help them to grow, like the Mothers Union and the Scouts, the Guides, things like that. And one of the things that one of the parishioners was very keen on was the young people. And he wanted to help the young people do little pantomimes and things like that. Now, he was Les Henderson, a tremendous worker for the church. And so what he did was he organized the young people who were at the Sunday school, and there were two Sunday schools in actual fact. The younger ones were in the kindergarten, where there were 50 or 60 young people. And then the older ones, there were 20, 30 and 40. So you can tell we had a tremendous pocket of young people who were keen to go on the stage. And the stage, the only stage that we had was, as you can see, is part of the sanctuary cordoned off. And so we had to use the chancel as part of the stage. We also used that part of the stage for another organization which we set up, and that was the Choral Society. And again, there were 30 or 40 of us in the Choral Society. And when we used to sing up there, we used to sing things like the Crucifixion, Olivet de Calvary, and sacred things. Occasionally, we would sing secular things. And it became quite obvious that what we needed was a stage. So Les Henderson, along with 2 or 3 other men, obviously had some idea of how to build a stage. And what they decided to do was build a stage, a collapsible stage, not when you were on it, a collapsible stage, and they built it in about 10 or 12 sections. And each section was built so that it could be bolted together. Now, all the wood was extremely substantial, and we were managed to be able to gather this wood by collecting it on the quayside, because I worked at Spillers on the quayside, which was a flour mill, and 3 or 4 of others used to work at Spillers. That's how I got the job. We used to go out and get the wood that was the ships were discarding. Also, on the other side, just outside of Spillers, there was 2 or 3 firms, and occasionally I used to see them burning wood. So I went over one day and asked them if I could have the wood rather than them burn it, and they were very pleased to let us have it. So what we did was we built this stage in about, as I say, 10 or 12 sections and bolted them all together. And on the top of the stage, that was all interlocked so that it was easy to walk on without tripping up. And then we did, in any case, cover it with carpets. Now that was where, there we are, that's the start of it. That was part of it.
Good choice.
That one and the second one there, that David is pointing out. Eileen Purdy was on the right. Joyce Scott next to that. I can't make out who that is. Who is it, Alan? Sheila will know.
Sylvia Laws.
Laws at the far end.
Eileen Purdy at the other end.
Eileen Purdy. Joyce Lumsdon.
And I can't quite put the name to the other one.
Joyce Scott.
No, oh, that's it.
That's it, yes.
Oh,
yeah.
That's right. Now that was part of the singing group.
Yeah.
So can you see the stage that we stood on? No, it was all covered on the front. There were sacks that we painted grey, dark blue. Now you see how substantial that stage was. And I don't know how many were on there, 30, something like that. Now, it was quite easy accommodating all those people. It was a very substantial thing. The problem was, after every concert, it had to be dismantled. Fortunately, we had a lot of very willing hands, and we had to store it underneath the chancel, and that's where it stayed until we moved from that site. When we were on the stage for a show, one of the problems was the changing rooms. And the changing rooms were at the back end of the hall, which on the right-hand side was the choir vestry. Next to that was the kitchen with a toilet and a shower, and wash basin. And next to that was the main entrance. So we used the kitchen and the choir vestry for the changing room. So you can imagine that what used to happen if it was raining, you used to have to go out into the rain to come in over either through the panic door or through the priest's vestry to get onto the stage, which wasn't very handy at all, I can tell you. Now that was another show that we had on. I think that was Snow White. You can see the 12 done. Now, unfortunately, I can't tell you the names of these youngsters at the front, but some people have come on to me and said, "Oh, that's me down there. I was 8-year-old, you know, this kind of thing." That's my wife, Joyce. She was Snow White. Is anybody else? Sheila was on there? No.
No.
No, no.
Thelma, my sister-in-law, was on.
Where's she?
She's on this very end.
Far end on the left as you look at it.
Oh, that's, yeah. So you can see it was a wonderful thing. And all those props, I mean, they were all, we did the whole lot, all on the stage. I mean, it was a magnificent effort. And all this, you see, right at the front, in front where the kids are, they were all the electric, and we did all the electricity. We had made our own lights. We made them out of tin cans, so that, and spotlights. We had them all in colour. It was a very, very good effort, really. And that went on for a heck of a long time. The next thing.
Let's just, can I just stop us for a minute, just see if there's any more questions? We've skipped a bit in the middle, which we'll move back to, and we'll get the staff these days, but never mind. He's gone off script. But
you're bringing back a lot of memories.
I'm afraid it's memory. I'm not reading it at all. I can tell. Are there any more questions? Say yes.
You would notice that Sheila and I weren't on any of those because we can't sing.
we know all about that, Alan. Now, that part, that is worth having a look at. Those were servers.
Right, hang on, they can't see this at the minute.
They can't see it.
Right.
He's taking it off.
Right, can you see that now, guys?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
See the service?
Okay. See that handsome bloke in the front?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we've seen him.
That's me. That one on
George.
George.
Ronnie Ward.
Ronnie Ward.
Vic Williams behind.
Yes.
Alfie Taylor next to him.
Okay, yeah.
And Colson Proctor on the left.
Right. Right.
Him, Colson Proctor.
No.
Now, what happened was, when we were a server, you were hand-picked because of our good looks, firstly, but also because we had to be very disciplined. What we used to do was, we weren't allowed to speak to one another at all until we went to the altar with the priest, and the priest and the server or servers used to say the prayer to one another in the sanctuary. Now, my young brother, who was the organist, and I, Doug, and I used to live at Cheltenham Terrace. And Doug and I used to walk from Cheltenham Terrace to St. Francis in Cragside and never spoke a word until we were in the sanctuary. That was the discipline that we had. We were not allowed in the sanctuary unless we had a cassock on, and we were very, very rigid about this, or Archie was. He wouldn't let us in. He used to tell us off if we did anything wrong. But it was I was very grateful that I got that discipline as a young boy, really. It stood me in good stead all my life. as you know, I do as I'm told always now. You can laugh now. Yeah. Now that's the choir. I cannot tell you all the names, especially these young ones at the front, except that one of them now comes to church in the last 2 or 3 weeks with his friends, and I believe he's the second or third one on from the right. Now, the man that I'm talking about is David Pickering. Now, he isn't on there, but he became a priest. But that's, I'll tell you about him later. But behind the young people, that on the immediate right, is Les Henderson that I told you about, who did a tremendous amount of work. I can't tell you how much work he did. Next to him was, now what they call him?
Smart looking lad.
Oh, that was it, it's me. That's right. Next to that was George Render. Next to that was Douglas, my brother. Kind of to make out him.
That's Albert.
Is that Albert?
That was Albert next to Doug.
Was it Albert?
Oh, that's Albert.
Mr. Piper.
Piper, Pop Lenigan.
Now that's
Ken Savage.
oh,
Ken Savage.
And is that Haydock? No, Haydock's the one after that.
No, that's Haydock there next to Bryce.
Next to Bryce. Bryce is on the extreme. That's my brother-in-law.
Yeah.
And him was Haydock, Harry Hanford.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bill Tilney.
Eric Tilney.
Eric Tilney, and that was John Clark.
John Clark.
Wasn't
So that's right. He listened. And where's Alan? You're at the back.
Yeah, the next.
A bit further along.
Come to the next one. The tall fella here.
The good-looking one.
Yeah, Dan.
That's Alan. So you can see that was
second row in the middle.
Second row, yeah. In front of Ian Kingsland.
Yeah, that's him.
And Raymond Connell.
That's right.
Behind. Oh, yes.
Alan Stoddard.
Alan Stoddard.
Mr. Denton.
Mr. Denton, yeah. Dick Lewis.
That's Dick Lewis.
Dick Lewis on the end.
And that's the terrible 5 at the back.
Yeah.
Brian Claydon.
Claydon, that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
So there you are. That's the choir in those days. All male, as you can see. It wasn't until it deteriorated later on when the ladies came in. But yeah, it was a very good, it was a very loyal. We used to do some good stuff actually. And Les Henderson was acted as choir master for years, although he didn't play the organ because he had a very withered arm and he couldn't pray properly.
That's a story about the
so,
organ. Told them the story about the organ with the sticky.
Yeah, I told them about that.
Yeah. Talking about the stage, I think we've done it.
Yeah. Right. Now then, also in the hall. Well, before that, we used to meet on a Sunday night in the choir vestry. And one week, Father Lenigan came and says, "I've got a proposal for you." And he says, "I want to tell you about an organization, the AYPA, and that's the badge on the right on the side." So he told us all about this youth organization, which was run by the youth, for the youth. Adults did not run it. There was a chaplain, which was Father Lenigan, and all the rest, it was done by the young people. So there was a president, the vice president, treasurer as usual, all the usual things. And what used to do was it was split up into 4 different sections: worship, work, edification, and entertainment. And he told us all about this kind of thing. And we were getting more and more mesmerized of what on earth is he talking about? There was so much to take in. And eventually, after about half an hour telling us about it, he left us. He says, think about it. So we just sat and talked to one another. And we said, well, yes, we think we might like this idea. And cutting a very, very long story short, we, as a parish and as a branch, were one of the leading branches in the diocese. We, as a branch, used to go to almost every church in the diocese to try and start an AYPA branch. And very, very, very often we did start them. We were very successful. And there was an age limit, and I think the age limit was 30 to 35, I'm not sure, I think it was 30, but if you were an officer, you could stay on to 2 or 3 years after. But it was the most wonderful organization. And we stuck very, very rigidly to worship, work, edification, and entertainment, which meant that everybody got sort of a share in what was their particular bent. If you were particularly interested in religion, well, obviously, that was fine. Entertainment, you know, everybody had a go at that. And all contributed to it. And I think that was the success of that branch. And that went on for long after I retired, long after. And I think the last one was Wendy Robertson. And I think she was the last one. And the last branch of the AYPA was held in the Newton Park Hotel with 3 members. So it deteriorated. And now, as far as I know, it does not exist at all. However, this vicar that I told you about, who's just arrived in the last 2 or 3 weeks, David Pickering, was a member in the AYPA and met his wife. And he's very, very, very keen to start up a revival of the AYPA. He was so enthralled with the organization that he would like to start it up again. And very often, when we speak to elderly priests, they've all been members of the AYPA. It's amazing that. Any questions? Unmute yourselves.
Derek. Could you go back to that photo? Could you go back to the photograph where it shows the photograph of the church and the font, please?
On the font, yeah.
And the font, yeah.
We're going the wrong way. I'm not quite sure.
I'm just saying because it looks very similar to the font we have at St. Francis at the moment. Is that be the case? Was it moved into the modern current church or not?
Was it the same font?
Was it the same font? He's asking.
They're not the same font, are they not?
No.
It's not the same one.
Oh, it's not in this. It's different font now in our church. That's the old font.
Yeah, it's not the same. No.
That's the old font.
No, that's big.
The old font of the new church is a different one.
Yeah.
Was that
Thanks very
Peter
much.
Anderson? Is that Peter Anderson?
John Telfer knows all about it because he was one of the chief scouts and he knows all about the whole.
Let's go back to Sharon. There's a one of the plan. That one.
Can you see that that's the whole plan, more or less, with the altar on the right and the stairs going down into the hall? Can you move it along for the end?
No.
At the left-hand side, you can't see it, but on the original plans, we altered it, the original plans, because the original plans hadn't the vestry and the kitchen and the main entrance on. The main entrance, we, or St. Gabriel's Church, altered that design to suit us.
We were talking the other day about the clergy vestry, because you were saying there was quite a lot of people used to get in there with the clergy and the servers. And when you look, it's only 5'6" wide, so it's sort of less than 2 meters wide. And because you've got this door coming in here and the stairs going up there, you haven't really got a whole load of space. And you said it was really very tight in there.
It was very tight because not only, if you got, as we did get, the priest and the acolytes and things like that, he had cupboards in there for his vestments and this kind of thing, and a desk. So you can tell we had very, very, very little room. But the thing that intrigued me was when we used to parade round, as we did almost every Sunday, we used to go in single file because of the size of the congregation. It was absolutely fabulous. That was my wedding, right at the back. That can you see on the extreme right with the door open? That is the choir vestry door. The one on the left, which is half open, that is the kitchen. Then there was the bookstand, and that door on the left is the entrance to the church. There is a porch there, a little porch. And in that porch, there was the bell push. Now the bell is on the outside of the church, and that bell was an old ship's bell, and it was very, very good. Where that went, I have no idea, but it was very, very effective. It was part of the choir boys' job to toll that bell. So every week we used to take turns each in pulling it.
We've done all the slides except the ones just at the end of the photographs of mainly your wedding, just to show the different.
That was all.
That's the doors that escape.
That was that the panic? Oh yes, the panic door being immediately behind, and the vestry, the priest's vestry on the left. Yeah.
And
that's the outside picture.
Like
that's
now.
Me.
And that's like now.
That's outside, the one that.
That's what it's like today.
There we are. So we've done it for an hour.
Sorry?
That's fabulous, Derek. That's really interesting. There must be questions and memories and thoughts that have been stirred.
Well, there must, yeah. I mean, I think about it daily now. Yeah. Well, it means that, as far as I'm concerned, and people like Alan and Sheila and I, it was certainly a firm foundation that was very well suited. I mean, St. Gabriel's did a fantastic job keeping around us, because until we went into the new church, I think St. Gabriel's was still very much involved. They were still on our PCC as representatives. They didn't used to control us, but they were there as reference from the mother church, and very often they took part initially. They were the treasurer and people like that, the readers. They took that because nobody knew anybody, and nobody knew what ability those people had until people like Archie took over. And then,
can I ask
it's lovely to see some of the old photographs and bring back so many memories. And also, of course, a sign of the times, all the ladies wore hats in those days.
Yeah.
Probably the men did outside as well, didn't they?
That's right. Yes, that's right, David.
Can I ask how many people remember it as as a church, but
Yes.
I remember it as a church hall. You know, that was when I was a boy, it was very much the church hall, and we used to
That's right.
trips down to Cragside for all the events there. But can obviously Alan and Sheila and Albert remember it as a church. Anybody else remember it as a church? Was anybody in it as the church hall then?
John Telfer, did you?
Yes, well, I went to the Sunday school there.
Yeah.
I don't think it was still the church. It might have been. I don't know. I remember the consecration of the new church, so maybe, you know, I did go to it when it was a church. But certainly, I went to the Sunday school. I remember how packed the Sunday school was, and I remember once when I took the collection, I spilled it all on the floor. There's a couple of things I could add. About 5 years ago, we were contacted by the grandson of Guy Goodrich. Guy he wasn't in the best of health when he was doing all of the work here. So he went down to the south, down to Kent, I think. But he got a bit better, and in fact, he eventually went over to Tasmania.
That's right.
Took a position in the church there, and he was married, and he had at least a son and a daughter. And the daughter's son was the guy who was the person who contacted us. He contacted Robert, I think, and Robert passed it on to Derek and I. And this guy's called Dr. Sam Hay. He's a doctor of divinity. He's very much involved with the church out there. He's a lecturer at a theological college, and I think he's a founder of it, or he's certainly the director of it now. And all his family or a lot of his family are very much involved in church affairs. This is in Queensland. At that time, 5 years ago, his mother was still alive, so that's Guy's daughter. She was in her mid-80s. Anyway, we sent him lots of information, some of the photographs you've just seen and plans and whatever, because he was doing his family history with a particular interest in what his grandfather did to establish this church.
Yeah.
So we sent him lots of stuff, and he was very interested.
He also, I don't know whether you knew this, John, but Guy Goodrich paid a lot of the bill for to have the church built. He paid it out of his own money.
Yes, I did know that. It was anonymous at the time, and I don't know how many people knew. But yes, when I was doing the research, I did find that out. Yes, but it was just called an anonymous donor all the time in all the various church records. Just one other thing, you mentioned the bell. I have vague memories of seeing the bell, but one of the pulley wheel that was used as part of the operation of the bell for many years was used at scout camps on the aerial runway. We had tied the stick to it, and to the pulley wheel. It was a big wheel, about a foot across, and that was used to as the method of going down the aerial runway at many scout camps. So they might still have that.
Yeah, probably. Are you done?
I am.
Put your questions in writing from now on. Well, thanks very much for being.
Thank you, Derek. I think what strikes me is not only the personal accounts and memories and stories, but how much it illustrates the social change that's taken place in urban life in the last 80 years or so. Because, you know, in a sense, in the time when the mission was founded, it would have been one of the most important places for society to take place, wouldn't it? For children to gather, for clubs to meet, for people to have the opportunity to go to dances or to any kind of activity. Sort of, you know, this is before people had lots of transports, before there was any kind of media. So such an important part of the social fabric as well, wasn't it?
I think another part of the social fabric, as far as I was concerned, was being totally involved. I remember Archie, I think it could have been it, Tim, where he asked us to wash, literally wash, the floor. And then we stained it all after that, you know, things like that. It bound us together. The dance club as well, which I didn't mention before. The dance club was very, very effective. Again, that brought in a different set of people. And I remember at one time, they put down, I was going to say, powder to make the floor slippery so they could dance. So it was lovely on a Sunday morning when we went to church. But of course, there were no carpets in those days as well. Well, we had a runner down the middle eventually, but that wasn't until a few years after. So yes, social. I believe that getting together and doing jobs like that it binds us together. There's no doubt about it. That's why I'm involved now still.
Good. Well, we've recorded it for posterity, so I think we'll be adding this talk to the archive. So you've helped found our digital archive, Derek. So thank you very much for that, because we will add that to our collective history. It's been fascinating. And if anyone else finds they've got pictures or plans or other memorabilia, we can always repeat this in another guise, or when we're allowed back into meetings together, perhaps put together a bit of a display, an exhibition. That I don't know, very open to any ideas really, but I'm very keen to encourage us to celebrate the history and the all the things that have gone into making the church as it is today.
I just want to say thank you to David as well.
Here.
He's done a lot for me and kept me right all the time.
Very good.
And he's operating. He's the operator.
You can see I'm being very successful in keeping them right, but never mind.
Lovely. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
I wish you all Godspeed. Go well.
And you. Bless you.
Thank you.
Bye.